Hi, my name is Mike Ensor and I'm with Google. And if you did not have an opportunity to see our technical explanation, please refer back to the presentation on our Anthos Migrate. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to demonstrate the principles and values that we had discussed in that presentation. I'm going to go and perform those here in a demo. So to start off with, I want to show a legacy application. And I made something that looked like a late 90s web page. With some good, blinking text and those types of things. I even have a widgets page, and I want to explain why I have these. So the first page, we're going to basically take the migration tool and we're going to migrate this application all on its own. This second page here is a widgets page, and notice it's under construction. So a part of our process is we're going to override that with a microservice that's going to provide that functionality. So just as a brief reminder, this is what the application process looks like, or the automation process looks like. We're starting doing some configuration setup or running through the actual migration. We're creating two repositories, one for the microservice and one for the original monolithic application. We'll create some magic with some ingress controllers, and we'll do some deployment functionality. So let me explain what our application or what our repositories look like. We have a series of, the existing monolith. This is pretending like this is going away, and we have no visibility into source. And so it's just the monolith application. We have the automation workflow, which is what we're kicking off first. I'll go ahead and kick that off and come back and describe the rest of this functionality. So I have it set up such that all we need to do is either make any changes to the application and make the pushes, or you can just run the pipeline manually. The pipeline that gets run, it's got 3 major stages and 3 different jobs. We're going to first install and set up the Anthos for Migrate. That will be followed up by creating the actual sources. And so these sources are things like VMware, it could be AWS or Azure machines. It could be GCE instances. There's various different sources that we can then pull information from. This is the configuration for that. Then the last thing we do is the output of that actually produces a series of YAML files that are used for configuration. So this whole first stage here is really setting up what is being migrated and what is the plans to make that migration happen. While that's being kicked off, I'm going to show the repository, the layout of the repositories. In here, I want to point out that GitLab, we are leveraging the concept of template applications. What it allows me to do is I can create templates of what my future applications will look like. And so when I create a new repository, I can then refer to these templates. And so I have a monolith application and I have a modern application. I also have a hidden private where I am actually able to encapsulate the CI/CD pipelines, and so I can create a don't repeat yourself or dry CI/CD pipeline inheritance model. All right, let's go back and see where we're at in the build. Looks like we have a little bit of time here, so we will let this migration get kicked off and get started, and I'm going to just sit for a moment. All right, so welcome back here. We're at the migration point. The output of the pipeline that we've been working on that generates the configuration is going to spawn 2 different repositories. I want to point out we have a subdirectory or subgroup called migrated applications. This is where the pipeline is going to generate those 2 repositories. Let's take a look at what's going on. All right, and so the output of our log that we're seeing here is we're creating a new project. In this case, we're creating the project to hold the contents of the output from Anthos Migrate. This is the configuration for setting up an actual migration itself, the actual byte copy at this point. So it takes just a moment to generate this, and at the same time, we're going to be creating a second repository as well. That second repository is the the companion application that's going to be the microservice that works with this. All right, and that job succeeded. So let's take a look at what was created. So let me just refresh my subgroup here. And we'll see that we have two new applications that are two new repositories that exist. Again, these are under the migrated apps. We're going to start by taking a look at the migration itself. And we're in a state where we have done nothing. So on the master branch or the primary branch, we have no changes to be made at this point. It's just a base. So I want to point out the sequence in the area that we're going to perform next is actually making this migration happen, which is in the phase 2. So the way we do this is we're using feature branches or special branches to contain the changes that we want. This allows us to have an opportunity to say, are things appropriate? Are they configured the way we want? It gives us, other individuals also the chance to do some code review. So let's go ahead and review our configuration. This is the direct output from the Anthos Migrate. And I notice I have one small change here that I want to make. I want to change the cluster name to be the actual cluster name. And at the same time, I'm going to quickly review, do I have anything that needs to be cached out or pulled out of the application? At this point here, everything looks pre-configured the way it should be. Ready for migration. Let's go ahead and change that. And the method in order to make this happen is we're going to use a pull request or a merge request here. And the reason we do this is because now we can bring in other individuals in the organization to say, please double check, is this the change that we want to do? And in this way, we can see our changes. And we see that we basically have an addition. So I'm going to go ahead and submit this. Typically, you would allow a CI/CD pipeline to complete fully before you do the actual merge. I'm going to go and force it because I know that this is going to work this time, and we're also in a demo. All right, so we've now merged. If we go back to our pipelines, we can see that we have a new pipeline running with the actual migration. We'll take a look at what this stage looks like. First, we're going to do some double checking, make sure that we're going to fail fast if there's any misfingering, so to speak, fat fingering. So we're validating the YAML. Then we're going to actually pause for a moment and say, let's do the actual migration. I put a manual switch on this to simulate maybe somebody within your organization who says, I want to wait until an opportune time to make that migration actually happen. So in a moment here, this is going to pop over and you'll see a little play button. At the completion of this migration, this step does take a period of time. Depending on the size of your machine that you're migrating, this can be anywhere between 5 minutes and several hours. The machine that we're migrating is about 20 gigabytes of space, and it takes about 6, 7 minutes in there. Luckily, you won't have to experience that. I will come back when it's ready. So I'm going to say, let's do it. Hit play. Yay! All right, let's go ahead and pick this back up. Our migration has actually happened. We moved this in about 7, 8 minutes. We're able to create a new container, take all of the existing data on that we specifically targeted off of that virtual machine and bring it into a container. So now what's happening on the pipeline here is after completion, it's going to output a few more configuration files. These are going to be the YAML file that's used to deploy the application itself to a Kubernetes cluster. And so you'll see here that we're reading these artifacts and we're going to be pushing those to the repository as well. So the output, we have a post-migration file, which gives us what the migration file was actually used. We do have a Docker file that gets created. This Docker file allows you for a day 2 operations to come in and update that original application. So say you need to keep things up to date from a operating system standpoint, or you need to install new applications, you have control over those things. All right, so we'll take a look at our pipeline. And we're in the process now of just finalizing the last bits. This is where the CI/CD pipeline takes all of those files, and we're going to push them into the repository. Again, we're going to follow the same pattern that we did before, where we push this into a branch, allow you to do some review, some customization, some changes as needed, and then we are able to go ahead and do the deployment. So in just a moment, when these are up here, we will go ahead and perform that. Out of the box, the original or the system gives you the deployment files you need, the deployment KRM descriptors, but that gives you a service that's headless. And so you are not able to, outside of the cluster, you're not able to target that that service that gets created. And this is done intentionally. So let's take a look at what files were created. So again, we're going to shift and go to the pending folder or branch. We'll go into our Kubernetes file, and we'll see that there's now a descriptive file that was 21 seconds old. Let's take a look at this. So in here, this is the output, and you'll see, like, here's the upgraded application, and you'll see here is the headless service. For shortcut purposes, I have created a service that I'm just going to cut, copy, and paste just to be fast. Now let's go ahead and edit this and make that change. Add this service in. And we'll go ahead and just do a service. Hit OK, we'll commit that change. And now we're in the case where we want to make this go live. So we're in a branch that's not going to deploy. You can choose at this point if you want to make this a deployment to a lower level environment. For demonstration purposes, we're just going to have only the master doing that. So go live. And so we create our merge request, submit it, and upon merging this, it will merge it into master. The CI/CD pipeline at that point will pick up and make the deployment happen. So I just go ahead and push merge. Now, as this is happening in the background, I want to show what we have. So back to our Kubernetes, or so our Google console here. I'm able to do a kubectl get all and show that at this point we have nothing in our cluster. As this pipeline is currently being run, we will start to accumulate the deployment and the services that are exposed by that, and then we'll be able to review them. And as that's happening, I'm going to go ahead and start on the second segment of this deployment, the last phase that we have. So I will come back to this deployment in just a moment. I want to go to the creation of the companion application. So one of the two applications is being deployed now. The second one here is our companion app. Our companion app is just a Golang app. And the intention here, as we have a source code, the intention here is it's just a web front end that serves up that listing page. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and kick this one off. The pipeline of the companion app just builds and deploys the application to the Kubernetes cluster with a service and an ingress controller that allows us now to split traffic at the highest level from a pathing perspective. And so at that /list, we're going to replace it with the new functionality. So from day one, we've automated the process on allowing and enabling a development team to come in and start extracting functionality out of a monolithic application such that you can start losing or reducing the dependency you have on that older application. All right, let's go back and see where we're at on that first pipeline, the completion of the deployment, and we are ready to deploy. So we are currently pushing this into our Kubernetes. So as this goes, we can go and take a look at kubectl, our kube control. And we have now deployed the new modern application. And let's see where we're at on the monolith. So we just deployed the monolith as well. Let's go take a look here at our kube control. And we have applications are coming up. You'll notice here that our monolith application is in the state of booting up. We have 4 services. We have 2 that are local and 2 that are public. And we'll go ahead and take a look at one of these in just a moment. Once we get an IP address for this. And you'll see that we have an ingress controller that's being set up. From our UI, we can take a look at this in the same direction. This is probably a good point to note while we wait for these services to come up in Kubernetes. I want to point out that we do have a UI that just came out a week ago for the Anthos Migrate. You're able to actually walk through this. I started this with the previous version, so the containers don't show up in here. However, if you start it with the latest as of Monday, you will see the containers popping up here. Let's take a look at our services. And you'll see here that we have a load balancer for our monolith application, and our ingress controller is being created. So I'm going to go ahead and open up our service. And you'll see here is the original service with, although it's not as pretty because I chose to reduce out the HTML content from the original. And so we only see the original old monolith application from this perspective. Now, as we wait for this ingress controller to pop up, this does take a period of time. So let's review what we've done. So in the first stages, the beginning of the demonstration here, we actually did a setup. We did a sourcing for where the image comes from. We did the configuration for the migration. Then we created two different repositories, one for the application and one for the companion app. We're currently in the process of finalizing the ingress controller to override that traffic that comes in and do some extraction. And we have our different applications that have been deployed. Let's take a look at our ingress here and see how close we are. And we're still currently creating. All right, so this will be the last pause we have here. So. All right, so it looks like our ingress has been created. We have the green. Let's take a look at what our ingress. I've routed a host name to make this a little bit easier. We're able to see the legacy application. We'll hit list, and this is the overwriting of the functionality from an endpoint, and as soon as it returns here. And then here is the web page. We don't have the images on there. My application itself does not do a whole lot, but you'll notice that the difference on here is that I have the applications coming from the Golang versus the old page that looked very similar to this. All right, so I hope you've enjoyed the demonstration. Please leave some comments, and we will get back to you.